of So Speak with Grace and Rachel.
Yeah,
Rachel and Grace.
yes.
And today we're
Welcome.
going to be talking about, you going ahead, Grace.
We're going to be talking about mental health. So, I've had this topic in my mind for quite a while now.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I think we've kind of dabbled in and out in terms of conversations
mm-hmm,
between us, but we haven't actually sat down and actually had a conversation about it. Um, and specifically, I wanted us to talk about mental health in the Black community and
mm-hmm.
our own experiences. Um, I would like to actually start and preface this with um, I think for us, every Black person out there, and I know that's a bold statement because I'm saying every Black person out there,
Every single
every
Black
single
person.
one, every single Black person, if it's not a situation or a topic that is very difficult to discuss, it's a topic that isn't acknowledged much, especially with the older
Mm,
generation,
mm,
right? The reason why I say that, I think nowadays we, um, the younger generation, we are more open to talking about mental health, whether it be depression, whether it be um, addiction, whether it be anxiety or social anxiety or whatever it may be, right?
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think we now are more open in discussing those things and just recognizing what they are,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Sometimes you feel a certain way emotionally, but you don't know how to communicate that. You don't know what that is.
mm-hmm,
And I found that for myself, a lot of the times it was very difficult to determine that I'm depressed or was
mm,
depressed.
mm-hmm,
And I thought it was something else
mm,
because it wasn't something that my family and I spoke about. It wasn't something that was acknowledged. It was, you feel down or you feel tired,
mm,
um, or you're having a bad day.
mm-hmm,
Go and lie down, you're going to be fine. Have something to eat, you're going to be fine. You
mm-hmm,
know what I mean? Like
mm-hmm,
there wasn't really an acknowledgement of, I can't be feeling like this daily for 3 or 4 months, if not a year, 2 years,
mm,
and
mm,
things never get better.
right.
And for me in particular, because we really need to hone into our own personal experiences, right? I started quite large and I want us to just become quite small in that. Um, I found that approaching someone who is older about how you feel mentally, the challenges that you're going through, the pressures, the anxiety, the depression, gravitating towards destructive things. For me, I've said this before in this podcast, it was alcohol for a very long time. For other people, it might be other things because I didn't have an outlet.
Mm-hmm,
But speaking to someone who is slightly older in my community, I found that it was impossible. And it had to take a while for me to understand what it was, first and foremost, because I didn't know what it was. And then I was able to then talk to somebody, but even then, it was dismissed as, we all have bad days.
yeah,
It's just a bad experience.
right.
I've been through worse. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. And I think for us in our community, I think especially with mothers and aunties and everybody else, it's always, I've been through worse. It becomes this comparison of who has felt more pain, who has suffered the
Mm,
most, as
mm,
opposed to lending an ear, listening to someone, whether you understand what they're saying or not.
mm-hmm,
And then if you do understand, giving them the help that they need or the advice that they need, or
mm-hmm,
taking them to someone who can help them with whatever it is that they're going through. So essentially, that's where I'm coming from in terms of our community and mental health. Did you want to add anything to that?
no, I'm just gathering my thoughts and understanding the angle that you're looking at this with.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that came to mind when you said in the new generation, we and I'm putting myself there. I'm I'm tenuously there, but I'm not in the
Mm-hmm.
old generation, so I
Yeah.
understand that. I'm right in between, but
Mm-hmm.
that there's a difference between being willing to talk about
Mm-hmm.
mental health issues and
Mm-hmm.
actually being willing to have difficult conversations. Because when you
Mm.
first said, with the newer generation, we're more open to talking about, that I'm depressed, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
having whatever.
Mm.
I do find the different experience though in actually discussing the issue. Like
Mm-hmm.
we will easily label it, I
Mm-hmm.
think, in the newer generation, but
Mm-hmm.
talking about the actual issues is
Mm-hmm.
still something that I find lacking. So I don't know if you were
Wow.
going in that direction, but that stood out to me. And the thing that you said about the older generation gave me a more understanding point of view, because I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced sharing with my own mother the
Mm-hmm.
difficulties of what I'm going through and actually being depressed and it
Mm-hmm.
feeling like it fell on deaf ears. But
Mm.
it's really interesting to hear you speak, because usually I'm the one bringing up the topic and you're
Mm-hmm.
adding into it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting to sit back and listen to you, because I'm able to allow my mind to process.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought of was, well, if these people are dealing with the difficulties of overt racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And overtly not being able to be hired, and
Mm-hmm.
poverty in a level that
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Mm-hmm.
understand, because
Mm-hmm.
they've given me the opportunity so that it's not a worry, then I
Mm-hmm.
can see where mental health would be put
Mm-hmm.
on the burner, or
Mm-hmm.
on the back
Mm-hmm.
burner,
Mm-hmm.
because you're dealing with more detrimental needs, as far as
Mm-hmm.
your livelihood is concerned. So before your mental health, really you're taking care of your physical self, and once your
Mm-hmm.
physical self is okay, which I believe that's what they've provided us, we're now able to look at our mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
to them, this is what I am assuming, at least some of them, it's not important, because the physical aspects of what
Mm-hmm.
they and we needed has been taken care of. So what are
Mm-hmm.
you complaining about, type of thing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're alive, you're eating,
Mm-hmm.
your basic
Mm-hmm.
needs are taken care of, which is what
Mm-hmm.
they were fighting to
Mm-hmm.
stabilize. And for
Mm-hmm.
us, we're now in a different place. I don't know if I would have thought of that if you weren't the one who were talking. So I know that was a
No,
big ass run on sentence, but
no, I agree with a lot of that. I agree with a lot of
mm-hmm,
that, but at the same time,
mm-hmm,
I think to completely put aside our emotions and our feelings because we're dealing with our physical self, I think it's nearly impossible. And the reason why I say that is because
physically
of my own
impossible.
mother. Right.
It is impossible.
Um, my own mother dealing with
Mm-hmm,
abuse in her own marriage.
mm-hmm,
And you've listed a lot of things that's external. So you leave the house and these are the pressures that are coming at you, right? Societal pressures. But what do you do when the pressures are coming from within, right? And I saw my mum be depressed and not realize she was depressed. Both of us not realizing she was depressed at the time
mm-hmm,
due to the fact that I was young. And I don't think she was the type of person. I think she was in such a vulnerable stage in life that I don't think she knew who she could trust to even talk about it.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know if she had the words to even say she's depressed.
Right. She
Do you know what I
probably
mean?
didn't. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was one of those things where, yeah, she provided for us and all of these different things. But a lot of the times, my mom didn't spend time with us because she would lock herself in her room because she would be
Mm,
like, not just emotionally, but mentally, it's almost like she was somewhere else.
mm-hmm,
Like she was never present for a lot of
mm-hmm,
the time.
mm-hmm,
And I remember once, it wasn't even once, there's just so many occasions that my sister and I talk about is my mum being on autopilot, running errands, making sure that everything is fine, going to the shops to buy some things, and always forgetting her shopping and coming home empty handed.
oh wow.
So by the time she goes back, Someone's already taken the food. Like someone probably walked into the store, found out that, this has already been paid for, they take it.
Mm-hmm.
She's already out of money.
Mm.
Sometimes the place is so far she can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there was so many instances where she would just forget herself or lose herself or
So she was
unable to.
dissociated, is
Oh
what
my
she was.
goodness,
Yeah.
it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And it's only now when I talk to her about it, and even now, it isn't a lot. I don't think she gives a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
um, she realizes, yeah, I was depressed, but talking about it, this
Mm-hmm.
is now what I wanted to say, that I think you hit the nail on the head. Having these difficult conversations with her, the older generation,
Mm.
is harder for her to say, this is how I felt at the time. She can only express to me the torture she went through. This person did this and this and this and
Mm.
this and this and this to me,
Mm-hmm.
but the effects and the implications that it has on her mental state, her emotional state, that she
Mm.
cannot deal with to the point where she can have a honest conversation
Yeah.
with me about,
Yeah.
right? So if I was to flip it on the other end, and as you was talking about the younger generation, I think that's the opposite. I think we are open to having difficult conversations. I think it's just, I can speak for myself. I can only speak for myself, and I can speak to my for my family members, like my sister, my brothers, or whatever. And I don't know if it's just the fact that we're very the kids in our family are so vocal, and I think we get that because my mum was repressed from being vocal. You know what I mean? So it was our
Mm-hmm.
way of saying, oh my gosh, I don't want to be like that. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
the opposite because
Mm-hmm.
she can't. So it's like she's been tied up. She can't say anything.
Right.
Um, but I haven't experienced personally the inability to have a difficult conversation with someone who's within my age range or my generation or anything like that about mental health. I haven't had any difficulties. I've
Mm.
had struggles with people who are older because it's almost like they tell you things half-heartedly or um, half truths, not
Mm-hmm.
because they are lying, but because it's like there's certain details where it's like I can't share that. I can't, there's still this mistrust
Mm-hmm.
and the inability to come to terms with whatever it is that they're going through, but most importantly, how it's affected them mentally
Mm.
to the point where some traumas are still not dealt with.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I know you wanted to say something about that.
Yeah, this has got me going in a various amount of directions. So I have experienced what you're saying firsthand as far as speaking to the older generation and to my mother specifically. Um, she experienced a great deal of trauma that she could not express. And the reason I know she experienced the trauma is based on how she treated me.
Mm,
So it wasn't something that she expressed.
mm-hmm,
And speaking to her, even as an adult, me as an adult,
mm-hmm,
I took it as, you're holding back
mm-hmm,
and not understanding that the fact that you're not sharing is what is
mm-hmm.
hurting us,
Yeah,
not you
absolutely.
actually sharing, which
Mm-hmm,
I know she doesn't understand that.
mm-hmm,
But I was not capable because her silence is what was hurting me. I wasn't capable of understanding that it's a generational issue.
mm-hmm,
And that's how they knew how to handle it because they were not taught in any way of how to handle it.
mm-hmm,
Um, so the topic that you're bringing up is
mm-hmm,
helping me to have a bit more compassion,
mm-hmm.
though not an excuse, though, because
Of
these
course.
issues obviously affected me.
Of course.
So there's that aspect. There is also the aspect of there's a that issue with the older generation of not wanting
Mm-hmm,
to speak, and in the
mm-hmm,
younger generation, yes, they are willing to speak, but
Mm-hmm.
having the capability to actually see it through. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can I explain? Like, we're going to talk about difficult conversations in one of
Mm-hmm.
these upcoming segments, and there's a difference in talking about having difficult conversations and
Mm-hmm.
actually having difficult
Mm-hmm.
conversations. So that's the part that I experience issues with the younger generation. So
Mm-hmm.
the label is openly accepted,
Mm-hmm.
but the application of the behaviors is lacking.
Mm.
And there is a mistake between, oh, I understand the label, so that
Mm-hmm.
means I know how to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a woke that's crazy, because you feel woke because you know about the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. I wouldn't say it's harder, but it makes it even harder to say, well, hey, just because you know about it doesn't mean that we're doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to impart that knowledge with not getting that person not being defensive, because now other things are coming on now too. There's
Mm-hmm.
the defensiveness, all of the mental health issues, or the issues that we're saying we're so well aware of, is
Mm-hmm.
coming up in actually trying to discuss the
Mm-hmm.
actual mental
Mm-hmm.
health issue. That kind of went in a circle, but hopefully you understand what it is that I'm saying. With the older adults, it's like approaching the issue at all is a problem,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
they're not aware of what can be shared, what is an issue. There's defensiveness, and the vulnerability is, it's difficult for the vulnerability to be exposed. I think that's for
Mm-hmm.
everyone, but there's also a level of lacking in vulnerability, and that's probably the connection. So the younger
Mm-hmm.
generation has the knowledge, but that
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability is still an issue to be
Mm-hmm.
dealt with. Whew.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that in terms of the younger generation of struggling to seek help when they know they need help.
Mm.
The understanding of having a problem is there, but for them to actually call on someone and say, "Hey, I need help," I find that that's a struggle for us. It's almost like we wait until the last minute when we're crawling on the floor, dying. Then we're like, "I need help." You know,
You
I
think that's
feel
a
I
new generation as opposed to an
that's a
older
new,
generation?
yeah, that's a new generation, because I feel like the older generation, it was like, no, nobody's asking for help, nobody is even thinking about help, nobody even knows what it is that's going on. They feel it, they have a sense of it, but it's not something where it's like, okay, I feel this certain way, I need to know why, this is the reason or whatever. No, I don't feel like the older generation was like that. I think for us, we understand and can identify, like you said, we can identify, look, I haven't been able to sleep for, let's say, haven't been able to sleep for 3 months. I'm super anxious. I don't want to go out. I don't want to socialize with anybody. There's certain key
You're
markers. You
saying
might
there's
not,
an awareness with the new
absolutely,
generation.
there's an awareness. There are key indicators. You don't have to be a psychologist, you don't have to be a doctor to be able to know all of these things, and I'm not saying that we are. What I'm saying is that you have these key identifiers and you know that there's something wrong, and that's it, the full stop. But to go above and beyond that, actively looking for help, actively trying to do something about it, even if it's not on your own accord, but find someone who is equipped to help you, to listen to you, to talk you through it, to take you to the right medical professional. That's not something we do. We wait until it's very, very dangerous for us, where someone has an episode. We wait until where something happens, and then it's like, okay, we're going to go and get help. That's what I have found for my own generation, whether it be from my own personal experiences, whether it be from my siblings, whether it be from friends. I've witnessed a lot, but that's all happened through leaving things to the last minute and thinking that you can handle it on your own and not having a support system around you. Um, I
Hmm.
don't know if you wanted to add anything else to that.
I basically wanted to say probably two or three generations down, we will have individuals who seek help immediately
God willing.
because we're coming from a
Mm-hmm.
generation who suppressed everything.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have certain awarenesses. So some
Mm-hmm.
of us seek, some of us are waiting longer, less of us are suppressing. So we're going to be having children who are suppressing less
Yes.
and less. So that's how
Mm-hmm.
I see that going. But I would
Mm-hmm.
agree with you that there is an awareness, but again, this conversation is opening up my eyes because change is generational. um,
Amen to that.
and it doesn't necessarily mean the next generation.
Of course.
So yeah, that's giving me an understanding of my own familial situation.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm.
that's why I was saying, as far as discussing mental health, there is still though it's not the
Imbalance, right?
same, yeah, it's still not quite right, even with
Mm-hmm.
the newer generation.
Mm.
There's the awareness, but there's still that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because we just it's gonna
Yeah,
take a
it's
while.
because it's a shedding, right? It's not something that happens straight away. It's a shedding. You're constantly shedding new skin, trying to figure out what works and what's best, and being open to change. I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of people. Change is so difficult to accept, especially when you've been stuck in the same place for a very long time and you
Right,
only know how to do one thing one way. You know what I mean?
right.
Um, I wanted to talk about religion,
Hmm.
and how that plays a big part in specifically for us, right? We, I'm not saying every single black person is religious. I'm saying that,
Definitely not.
no, I'm saying that that's usually our root. I think that's usually something that we gravitate towards, we hold on to, and I think it's embedded in us more so than I feel like other cultures,
I would
right?
agree with that. Yeah.
Even if you are not religious, I've seen people who proclaim atheism. As soon as something crazy happens, they drop on the
Jesus.
floor and start praying, Jesus help us all, right? You're stuck on the plane and the plane does this crazy movement. Jesus, I don't want to die
Yeah.
today. I've got stuff to
Not so
do.
much an atheist now, are
I'm
you?
telling you, it's wild. It's
Yes.
hilarious. But
Yes.
I wanted to touch upon this because, again, I've seen it firsthand, as well as I think it's this. How can I say this? I want to say this quite delicately. I think for every single time it's been difficult for our parents, grandparents, or anybody else who was older to, whenever it was difficult for them to deal with the pain and the hurt or the brutality or the rejection or whatever it is that they're going through, the trauma.
Hmm.
I think for every conversation that we want to be able to have with a therapist, I think faith was the anchor to those things,
Preach,
right?
sister. Pun intended.
I think holding on to belief, holding on to Jesus for those who believe in Christians, those who are Christians who believe in Jesus. um, I think it's the idea of being able to pray away trauma, being able to pray away issues, problems, troubles, trials, tribulations. They all go under one umbrella for us, and our parents and grandparents or whoever. And I say this based on personal experiences. Again, I'm not trying to put this on anybody else. Other people might have different experiences. But I remember for myself, my mum would rather attend church and pray,
Hmm.
which there's no problem with that. That's not what I'm saying. Than having to deal with something practically,
Yes.
even though there were answers, practical answers to the problem that she had.
Yes.
So something that wasn't spiritual,
Hmm.
she will make it spiritual
Hmm.
in order to kind of neglect, not having to deal with it, but having to pray it away, asking God for help, even though to us it seems quite obvious that God is pointing you to the practical problem. This is how you deal with your issue.
Right.
But at the same time, it's that thing where it's like almost this euphoric, would you call it, like this euphoric kind of habit of constantly just going to the altar, constantly
Hmm.
praying,
Hmm.
constantly, calling on the name of the Lord, constantly just saying, God is going to heal me from this,
Hmm.
but not looking within, not
Right.
looking internally to actually analyze what is going on, what is my problem,
Hmm.
how do I deal with it? Not because you can deal with things outside of God, but I'm saying, how do I deal with it the best way that I can in my understanding? And if I don't understand it, then I can always pray about it for God to give me understanding.
Right.
So I found that the lines were blurred always, if not, there was no line at all,
Right.
of constantly seeking spirituality
Hmm.
in order to deal with things that are physical and tangible. I
Yes.
hope that made sense.
That made perfect sense. And I'm like, well, are all Black people the same? But so my experience with this is in the Haitian household, I grew up mostly with my grandparents. So my grandmother had a suspicion, because I'm going to put this together with suspicion,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um, of many, many things.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think what it had to do with was fear and
mm-hmm,
ignorance.
mm-hmm.
I think these are the two things that drive spiritualizing everything or a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't know an answer, and you don't have others who know the answer,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a marginalized community,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have the powers that be are not you. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a limited way of looking at the world. It's
Yeah.
either I don't know how to, like, it's either we do it or
Mm-hmm.
there's no other way for it to be done.
Yeah.
So I think spiritualizing simple matters makes it where you don't have to say I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
God is going to take care of it, or
Mm-hmm.
you
Or the
know
devil did it.
these are the answers, because in one's ignorance, and I'm not saying this in a negative way at all, we still
Yeah.
try to find an answer in
Mm-hmm.
some way.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't know the answer, you make
Mm-hmm.
up the answer. And to
Mm-hmm.
say that it is either coming from God or from the devil is a way of settling the matter, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
and not
Mm-hmm.
understanding that it is a practical matter. I had a friend of mine who
Mm-hmm.
had like she had a medical condition,
Mm-hmm.
and her mother told her that it might have been, and she's Haitian, it might have been, people who were putting a curse on her.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced these types of
Same.
sayings
Same.
firsthand. And I really had to say, have you gone to the doctor? Did
Mm-hmm.
you check out that it is this? Have you
Literally.
Googled? Because there is a practical, most likely a practical response for this, a practical
Mm-hmm.
answer for
Yeah.
this. And I almost laughed, but I didn't, because I I again feel that the source of it is fear and ignorance,
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing, because of the fear and ignorance, the
Mm-hmm.
individuals not knowing when it is actually a spiritual issue, because you do have spiritual issues, like the Haitian Revolution was started and based in spirituality. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, so
Mm-hmm.
spirituality has a strong and real place with a lot of Black people, Black history,
Mm-hmm.
Africans. It has a really strong and powerful foundation, but
Mm-hmm.
everything isn't that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long answer. Hopefully that made sense. But I too have experienced the spiritualizing everything, and I
Yeah,
though I think spirituality is high on the list of areas that are important in life, it's definitely not the answer for every single thing. Some things are practical.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to preface that by, you know, praying and asking God for guidance isn't the negative thing. It's
Definitely
not,
not.
no, it's the issue is when you're not doing your due diligence to be able to find out something in the normal manner
Right.
first,
Right.
before making assumptions or claims of
Right.
spiritual warfare, or people putting curses on you or whatever. That's when things become very, like you were saying, it's rooted out of ignorance as opposed to it being the final straw.
Right.
I've been to the
Right.
doctors, I've done this, and nobody has an answer for me. I spent all of this money, no one has an answer for me. Right, I'm going to go to God and ask him what's going on.
Or
That to me makes
do
more
those
sense.
two things
Do,
together.
yeah, simultaneously.
Like, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. um so yeah, so based on what we've both been through,
And maybe it
yeah, Black
also
people are all
has
the
to
same.
do with lack of feeling like you don't have power. I think that
In what
also
way?
has to do with that. So I'm trying to think again of my grandmother, and I can't, for the life of me, I can't think of any of these sayings, that would make it more clear. But let me come back to that, the lack of power. Let me
Hmm.
come back to that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Oh,
I totally
okay.
interrupted.
Sorry, I
My
thought you were
bad.
gonna say something else.
Mm-mm.
Now I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
My bad.
um, right. So what I was saying about doing the due diligence to be able to figure things out practically first, or simultaneously with seeking spiritual aid,
Mm-hmm.
would really kind of help that, resolve that, right?
Mm-hmm.
With people who struggle to be able to put into practice things that are more practical. So when I was talking about my mom, I said that praying away things became the norm, right? Pray away your cold, pray away sadness, pray away depression,
Right.
pray away all of these different things. And I want to touch upon also the idea of, I think you even said it before, we've built this wonderful life for you. Why is it that you're unhappy? Why is
Yeah.
it that, you're not, you're not basking in the joy of liberation and freedom and education and health and wealth and all of these different things. And when it comes to mental health, that's one of the difficult things for me specifically, is kind of a dismissal of what it is that you're going through by tangible things, by what you have,
I'd like
right?
to add to that,
Please go
lack
ahead.
of emotional support, because
Yeah,
the physical is being taken care of as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what people misunderstand or neglect a lot of the time is understanding that you as a human being, you're made of three parts. You're not just a body,
No,
you're a spirit,
definitely not.
you're a
Yeah.
soul,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have
Mm-hmm.
a mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's all of these components that make you. And
Mm-hmm.
just because your body is fine, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean your mind is fine. It doesn't mean your
Mm-hmm.
spirit is fine. It doesn't mean your soul is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the difficult things that I had to go through with my mum for a really long period of time.
Mm.
And I need to preface this by also saying that what you consider to be fundamentals and something where it's a right for you to have, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times you will find that to another person, it's a luxury, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to really
Especially with the
understand where,
older generation.
oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So um, not being able to communicate that at the beginning was so frustrating for me because I couldn't understand, why is it that this woman can't understand? Why is it
Right.
that she can't see? Why is it that she can't see my problem? Because
Mm.
all she thought was, everything's great. Do
Right.
you know what I mean? Everything's
Yeah.
great. You've got this, you've got that, you've got this. Like
Right.
everybody would love to be in the position that you're in. It's like, yeah, but I'm not
Right.
talking about the things that I have. I'm
Right.
not talking about my position.
Right.
I'm talking about my mind. I'm
Right.
talking about my heart, the inability for me to literally do anything.
Well, pray to
For
God.
me to literally,
What's the problem?
literally, I'm telling you, right? So it's this idea of having the tangible, having the physical,
Mm-hmm.
that should cover every single wound.
Right.
That should cover every
No,
single
no, no, no. Not cover every single wound. That there should be no wound. There is no wound. You have
of
these
course.
physical things. What wound?
Right, right. And in a capitalist age where buying things, right? And I find myself doing this as well. And this is not me talking at people, this is me really delving in deep
None
of
of this
finding
is
yourself.
ever talking at people.
For
We
sure.
experience all of the things we're talking about.
It's you find yourself in a place where you start to buy things to make you feel better,
Well,
eat to make you feel
yes.
better, drink to
Yes.
make you feel
This
better.
is how
And it's almost
addictions
like
are born.
exactly, exactly. And I think that that little bit of insight to, you have all of these nice things,
Mm-hmm.
there should be no problem,
Mm-hmm.
is almost telling you that buy more things to get rid of that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
order for you to feel better, but
Mm-hmm.
you never feel better. And then you
Yeah,
just end up
because
getting
what
more
I feel
things.
they're saying with that is if I was able to do that, I would have bought the things and that would have made me feel better. Because,
Mm-hmm.
of course, within them, they also don't understand what would fill their gap of that's actually them admitting emptiness, actually.
But this is the thing.
But they're not.
It's
Uh-huh.
still it's still what do you call it? Um,
I'm not
it's
saying
still
it takes
subjective.
care of it.
No, no, no. I'm saying it's still subjective
Uh-huh.
because the gap could be anything. They might see what you are talking about as not an issue,
Right.
but they might see something else as an issue, right? Does that make
Explain.
sense?
No, not to me right
It's
now.
like okay, it's like having, so for my mom, her marital life, her love life was more
Mm-hmm.
important than anything.
Mm-hmm.
My mum was blessed enough to have 4 kids. My mum was blessed enough to be living in Europe. My mum was blessed enough to have a job. My mum was blessed enough to always make ends meet and all of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that she strived for the most was love. And the thing that she strived for the most was marriage,
Mm-hmm.
for multiple reasons. So when anybody else complained about anything else,
Mm-hmm. At
that
least
wasn't
you
her problem.
have, at least you have a
Thank
husband,
you.
or yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that was the focus of what, and this is the thing, that's not a bad thing. If you desire love, you have every right to desire it, right? My whole thing
Everyone
is,
desires love. So
right?
yeah, yeah.
But it comes in different levels. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Right? In terms of your pursuit of it. That's what I mean by that.
Mm.
Um, so for her, it was um this is what I need to feel within myself, and this is important, and this is dire for me. So when you're talking about stuff like that, that's where her emptiness comes from. That's the things
Mm.
that she would take seriously,
Mm.
right? So that's what I mean
Understood.
about everybody has different emptiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other things she had it covered. I've got kids. There's people who she knew who were childless, who
Mm-hmm.
wanted children. That
Mm-hmm.
was a burden for her.
Mm-hmm.
But as much, I'm sure she was sensitive to their needs, but it wasn't something that she was like, oh my goodness, I totally feel for you. This is something she had already had, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I was trying to communicate to her is the things that I find important and the things that you find important, they're different things, but it doesn't mean that one is less important than the other.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm saying this is making me feel upset and
Mm-hmm.
this is making me feel a certain way, my marriage has nothing to do with it. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
at least you're married. That has nothing to do with it. This is not about that,
Right.
right? Or at least you have a job. That's not about that. At least you have
Right.
money in the bank account. That's not about that. Praise Jesus for it. Yes, I understand. However, we're talking about this right now in this
Mm-hmm.
very moment,
Right.
right? That's where I felt the disconnect came from.
Mm-hmm.
And also being labeled as an ingrate because you're not looking at the things that, you know, you do
You
have, which
should
I
be
do.
grateful
Yeah,
for,
yeah,
which
you
you
should be
are.
grateful. Yeah,
So that
you are
means you
grateful for
can't
it.
complain about anything because, you
Exactly,
have these things.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it makes you kind of, cave from within. That means I can't speak to you without you judging me because you're looking at me as an ingrate when
Right.
I really have this internal issue, internal battle, um, that I need someone to hear me, at least if they can't help me to hear me,
Right.
and at least say to me that everything's going to be okay. I
Right.
need that safe space of
Right.
trust
Right.
where I can actually open myself up, no matter how hard and difficult it is, no matter how much pain I feel.
Right.
I need to know that I can find that place to be able to do that. And I
Yeah.
feel like this is where we are now, my generation of feeling so tight and internalizing everything where it's like we're leaving everything to the last minute. We're
Mm-hmm.
trying to deal with it on our own. We're trying to talk to ourselves. We're trying to, and this is what we was talking about before about not being in the right mental state and still trying to advise yourself, which I believe is a dangerous thing. Because what could you possibly tell yourself that is beneficial?
So let me address the one before we go to
Oh,
the other.
apologies.
No, it's okay.
I shouldn't have
Um,
went on.
it's okay. So I could be wrong, but I
Yeah,
think when it comes to generations, there will normally be a gap of
yeah,
understanding from one generation to another,
yeah.
and based on how open a person is willing to be is how they'll understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, every whatever years in society, there are
Mm-hmm.
a different set of expectations of what goals are. And as much as we try or believe, I would say for myself, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not affected by society, I am.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So during your mother's generation, is your mother in her
Mm-hmm.
60s?
No, she's not
50s?
in her 60s. She's got, yeah, 50s.
50s.
Late
Okay.
50s. Late 50s, yeah.
So I would say that's around kind of like my mother's generation. Marriage was like the huge thing. Having children
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
huge thing. Those
Yeah.
are how you show off how successful you've been,
Show off is the
right?
highlight word there. It's stunting.
Right. So it's understandable, not comforting, not helpful, but it's understandable because for that generation, that was the thing. And it still actually has trickled down
Mm-hmm.
to my generation. And I would say the
Mm-hmm.
generation
Mm-hmm.
under me too,
Mm-hmm.
like that these are the goals.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're also blindly seeking goals and not able to examine yourself,
Mm-hmm.
having achieved or not achieved these goals are where their level
Crushing.
of accomplishments are, come. So where
Yeah.
your mother was able to have the children, it's like, okay, check. not checking for herself whether that was important, but
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
societal, I got
Yeah.
that done.
Check.
The
Career
right,
check. Yeah.
right.
Health
The
check. Yeah.
love aspect, that wasn't taken care of. So that's the open wound for her. So that's how she's looking at everything.
Mm.
I wouldn't say everything, but like
Hmm.
that's her purview. That's her,
Yeah.
which
That's her.
I totally understand that
Mm.
because
But there's
like
nothing wrong with that. That's what I'm trying to say. There's nothing wrong with that. Is not being able to understand that this is what I find important. Someone else might find something else important.
no, see,
I.
I think there are issues with it, not off of the fact that I want love, but the
Yeah.
fact that I want it because society has told me. This is not out of self-examination. This is
No,
not
I think for her is like, I want to be in love. It's
okay.
like my mum has been like this from God knows how. Like we still make fun of her because she's just soppy, right?
Mm,
She wants to be in love, and
mm,
she has been in love. But I think it's the heartbreak. It's all of these different things. But for her, she wants to be adored. She wants to be in love. She wants to have someone to call her. Like all of these different things, as opposed to it being societal. The problem is she gets blinded by it because everything is with rose-colored glasses.
mm.
Yeah.
Um, ag- I will not touch too deeply on that, but
Mm-hmm.
I do know that just because a person has always been away doesn't mean that the thing they want is something that is from themselves and not
Yeah.
imposed upon them. But I won't
Yeah.
get too involved
Mm-hmm.
in that. But yes, this is the way now she's looking at
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So your what it is that you what is an angst for you is not an issue
Mm-hmm.
because it's just not the thing that she sees is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think generationally speaking, that's going to be an issue, but it only won't be an issue based on how
Yeah.
open-minded
Yeah.
the two people are the people who are experiencing the relationship and the difficulties. You have to be open-minded enough to be able to listen to the other person. But again, in the older generation, explaining things and understanding a different point of view is
Mm-hmm.
something that I it's like the older generation speak at each other. As far as
Yeah.
understanding is concerned, it's a foreign thing. You
Yeah.
if you guys share the same point of view, then you understand each other. If you have a different point of view, y'all never understand each other because
You've
compromise
hit the
and
nail on the head.
understanding is like not it's so weird, like understanding another's point of view even though you don't agree with them is far beyond the comprehension well
What
I would say of
I.
my mother and grandmother. It's like I don't understand you, so this is not true or it doesn't exist or yeah.
My sister and I are constantly saying, Mum doesn't listen.
Mm,
That's an ongoing thing. Mum doesn't listen. I don't think it's about not understanding. I think for a lot of the times it's, I don't want to listen. I don't want to listen because I've already made up my mind on what I want. I've already made up my mind of what I think this is. I've already made up my mind of what we're going to do. Like it's already been done. And it's this kind of authoritative um, system where you being the child, it doesn't necessarily matter what you think or whatever. I'm the parent, I'm right. So even having a conversation that dictates not just understanding, but true, active listening to what somebody is saying because you really want to know where they're coming from. I think that's tough for a lot of people. I think people hear you, but they're not listening to what you're saying. And I found that that's been a struggle for a lot of conversations. It's been a root of frustrations for me in a lot of situations but I know that it's always based on certain topics that trigger my mum where she turns her ears off.
Mm.
You know, there's certain things where you talk about where it's like, she's not gonna, like, I can bet $1 million or £1 million, whatever it is. I know that if I bring a certain topic up, my mum will look at me like she's just looking at me, but there's nothing behind her eyes. And everything I've said, she won't even mention it. She'll just start talking about herself or whatever it is that she wants to convey in that moment in time, right?
Mm.
So it's quite difficult. I don't know if you wanted to add something right there before I ask you
Mm.
something.
I just in my mind I'm like, well, how does one conduct a relationship in those types of environments? And I'm thinking for myself specifically because
Mm-hmm,
my mother and I do not have an intimate relationship at all
mm-hmm,
because of these big gaps of where something is an issue for me or I'm being treated unwell or disrespectfully, and
mm-hmm,
it is like not understood on that
mm-hmm.
end. So I was just thinking, as far as listening is concerned, I would say my mother doesn't listen to anything that I say, or mostly anything. Yeah, because that that willingness to reach out, and she can only understand what it is that she's experienced.
This is exactly what I'm saying.
And mine and her experiences looked vastly different.
They differ. Of course they are. You're two different people, you know?
No, but what I'm saying is, um though beneath the surface it could be a
Mm-hmm,
lot of the same things that are going on, but
mm-hmm,
because it doesn't look like that to her, it's completely different. And I would say that I'm going to keep this to myself.
mm-hmm,
But a lot of experiences that I have had is
mm-hmm.
similar to the experiences my mother has had, because she
Wow.
did not resolve her issues. So of
Mm-hmm,
course, if you don't resolve something within yourself, you are
mm-hmm,
subconsciously passing it down to me,
mm-hmm,
to your
mm-hmm.
younger generation. So
Because you can only act it out.
a lot of things that I am going through is
Mm-hmm,
similar to what my mother has gone through, but she cannot see it. And therefore she cannot relate to me
mm-hmm.
because it's not looking on the surface to
She
something that
can't
she can
recognize it
understand.
in herself. She
Correct.
can't recognize it in herself, therefore she can't recognize it in you.
Right.
And I think not being able to deal with certain situations, you act it out. And whoever is around you, i.e., your kids, they watch you and they learn. And,
Whether you act it out or don't
or
act
not,
it out,
yeah,
yeah, both of
they
those
learn.
things
Mm-hmm.
affect your children. They
Yeah,
see both. So
absolutely.
yeah, so my mother and I, it's like we're in parallel universes.
Yeah.
So, and I have there's a lot of understanding that I've done on my part, which it seems like you're also doing with your mother, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, why is this an issue for you? So there's a lot of examination from the
Mm.
younger generation, but the older generation is just not knowing a thing that's going on, basically. And the willingness, it's the willingness to be open-minded enough to reach the younger generation that makes the biggest difference. And for my mother,
Absolutely.
there ain't no interest, at least on my end, on her end, to understand me.
I think with my mum, our relationship is more rooted in compromise and compromises on my behalf.
Mm,
On my end, compromise and patience and understanding more so from my end than her end. But in turn, I think my mum's way of, obviously my mum says she loves us and all of these things, but I think the way she shows loves is being reliable. Whatever it is that my kids need. Again, it comes back to, do you have the fundamentals? You have a roof over your head, you have clothes on your back, you have food in your stomach. So
right.
she prides herself in that. What is it that you need? wherever it is, whatever time, I will be there. I will come. I will help. I would. My mum's very practical physically. She's a very physical woman.
Right.
But a lot of the times, my sister and I joke that she's emotionally stunted.
Yeah.
Um, but again, she's been through a lot. So, and in the same breath, I can't judge her completely and say, she's this, she's that. She's no, she's been through a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot
And
that
it's
most people
also
wouldn't be
the
able to combat.
generation that she's in. She's been through a lot, and how that
Yeah.
generation handles difficulties is
Yeah,
basically not.
exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly. So, in conclusion, as we're coming
Mhm.
up to an hour, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel, or what would be your view on how we can bridge the gap? How do we bridge the gap
Woo!
between? I didn't say it's an easy question, and I didn't say it can be done overnight. But what I am asking is, if there is a way, how do we even begin to bridge the gap where we can talk about mental health, we can talk about issues that are not tangible, things that you cannot see, things that are internal, things that pain us, things that have strongholds, that hurt, that fester, that sometimes bleed. How do we convey what it is that we are dealing with in an emotionally mature way, as well in a way where the conversations are beneficial for both parties, not just one person?
Mm, 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 mm. I
Put
think
you on
there's
spot.
always a way to deal with really every and anything. It is the level of work and patience and understanding that people are willing to put in. That's the variable. That's what's really going to affect. So older generation, as far as understanding, because even me, I'm experiencing this in dealing with people who are younger than me, that there are certain behaviors, understandings, thought patterns that are not similar to what I went through, because I used to try to look at things from a view of, oh, this is how I was. I recognized that I had to stop doing that. Um, because yes, I can relate to a younger generation with this is how I was, but there is a limit to that, as to things that are shared amongst humanity and where an individual comes up and is concerned. So there has to be an understanding of that, of yes, I understand what it was like to be 19, but this 19-year-old is also an individual. And if that's not constantly being replayed in a person's mind, then frustration is going to be happening, and lack of understanding and giving up, is going to occur. So
Yeah.
having an understanding that people are different, and generations are also, there's a world of difference between the two of you, and sometimes all you can hope for is a witnessing, maybe not an understanding, just a witnessing of, oh, this is how that's handled now. I don't think that way. And there's no judgment. It's just that's not how I used to do it. So I think that type of understanding has to be at the foundation of the generational mental health understanding. um Other than that, yeah, open-mindedness, um patience, time, space, respect, because that is where, between my mother and I, that there is a deep issue. For me, understanding my mother, I'm an analytical person, so I am down with understanding or
Is your mother
gaining
the
an
same as well?
understanding.
Is she analytical too?
I don't know that my mother is so analytical. I know that she is not patient.
Okay.
So there's no patience. And for me, what is a bottom line, that's not
Mhm.
something that she'll respect. From I need to be respected. Like
Okay.
yelling at me and that type of stuff can't occur.
Hmm.
And that's not something that, at least with me, that she's able to respect. And for me, that's my line.
Mm.
So if there's no respect, then the relationship for me, it's just not worth it, because I'm losing dignity on a
Hmm.
daily basis or at every turn that I'm relationshiping with you. And no relationship is that important to me.
Can I
So
ask, do
mhm.
you think that her line is lack of patience? Like patience is her line?
I don't know what her line is, because I don't really know her too well. I just know that she's volatile because of so much trauma that she's been through, that she's not been
Hmm.
able to um heal. So I don't know what her line is. I know what my line is, and she's not able
Hmm.
to respect that line.
Hmm.
So my understanding of, in order to for generations to be able to have conversations, or a level of respect is
Hmm.
important, or you lose relationships that way.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I think looking towards the future, I think for us to, and I'm going to sound like I'm quoting Michael Jackson, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change.
Hmm.
Um, Man in the mirror song. But I feel like looking to the future, I think the work begins with us, right? Um, if you need to take therapy, take the therapy. If you
Right.
need the work, do the work. If it
Right.
means you writing in a journal so that you can get to grips of how you feel and how you can articulate your feelings with others,
Right.
write a journal,
Right.
right? If it means going on a retreat, meditation, prayer, do that. If it means you finding time for solace, do that. If it means you finding a support system or a support group, that doesn't have to be your family, it can be elsewhere, do that, right? These are all the things and tools that you are giving yourself so that you have a better chance of overcoming whatever it is that you are struggling with, but more importantly, how to show those who are coming after you the
Right.
options that they have also, and how
So
they can be able to deal with their own issues. Yeah.
so
Sorry,
I
please
would
go.
say, like, that's something that, for us is more easy. But as we were
Yeah.
talking about the older generation, looking
Yeah.
within is not, those words might as well be another language.
Literally, it's almost like
So,
it's like they're so stuck in their old ways, like they're never gonna change, you know?
look
So
within yourself. If I say that to my mother, it's like she'll probably try to physically look into her. So, like, those words are not computing. So
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
that's where it's like, so my
Mm.
understanding, because, and also, I don't know if this is quite bridging the gap, but knowing where limits exist, because you're
Yeah,
not always going to be able to resolve the problem. It may look
exactly.
like it not being resolved.
Hmm.
And that's, to me, where I've come in my
Hmm.
understanding. Like, I get it. I
Hmm.
get that work has to be done on her end,
Hmm.
and she's not able or unwilling, and I accept that. And for
Hmm.
me, that's what the resolve is, because
Yeah.
there's nothing that I can do. So, yeah, sometimes it's just not resolved, and that's just the answer.
Yeah, that's true. But you also need the tools to be okay with not being okay.
Right,
Like being in the full surrender mode where you're like, you know what, it stings, it hurts, but I know that I'm gonna be okay. It's fine,
right.
right? And that's it. That's my final thoughts. I
Okay.
don't know if you wanted to add anything else to
I do not. So this was a
that.
titillating conversation.
Gosh, hilarious. But yeah, so I have been Grace Cagrena,
Oh.
and Rachel has been Rachel Talifer.
Yeah, the sassy Rachel can be found on Instagram.
Mm.
Also, our Soul Speak podcast can be found on Instagram as Soul Speak Podcast. And we also are found on iTunes, YouTube, and
Spotify.
Spotify. Please
Yay!
follow, like, interact, leave comments.
Subscribe, comments,
Yes,
yeah, share. Um,
yes.
so yes, so you guys can find me also on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Grace_Cagrena. And you can also find me on Instagram at the_reading_hideout. So all of our stuff is right there. You can be able to check us out. But as always, it was brilliant, a wonderful experience having this conversation. I think it was an eye-opening one,
It was for
and we
me.
got to internalize a lot of things and analyze things within ourselves as well. But as we usually do, so
Yes.
we thank our listeners for listening. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
And see you next time.